13 years before Prophet Muhammad made his historic migration to Medina, the Arabian Peninsula was submerged in a period known as Jahiliyyah, an era defined by deep spiritual ignorance and rigid tribal codes. At the center of this world sat Mecca. Inside its ancient walls was the Kaaba, a site originally built for the worship of one god, but now the center of a chaotic and highly profitable economic trade network. A single tribe, the Quraysh, wielded absolute dominance over this network, controlling the trade routes and the wealth flowing through the city. The Quraysh filled the Kaaba with hundreds of carved idols, turning polytheism into the city's primary economic engine. They monetized the spiritual life of the region, ensuring every visiting tribe contributed to Meccan prosperity. Mecca operated as a rigid system where tribal loyalty and ancestral tradition outranked all else, creating a society primed for a disruptive collision with any new idea. This system was challenged when Prophet Muhammad began receiving his first revelations, a message that threatened to dismantle the entire Meccan order. The message introduced Tawhid, the absolute, indivisible oneness of God. It demanded belief in an unseen creator, stripping away the need for physical intermediaries. This new concept was an immediate threat. By demanding exclusive worship of the unseen, Tawhid rendered the physical idols in the Kaaba worthless, threatening the very engine of Quraysh power. The Quraysh responded with escalating hostility. What began as public mockery quickly turned into the physical torture of the early believers. The persecution eventually culminated in a devastating social and economic boycott. For years, the early Muslims were starved and isolated, cut off from the trade that sustained the city. These first 13 years were not about building a state or drafting laws. They were a desperate period of pure spiritual survival against a society determined to crush the message. How does a new faith penetrate a society stubbornly clinging to its ancestors' idols? It happens through the architecture of the language. Early verses were short and relentlessly rhythmic. While these red and yellow vocalization dots were added later to standardize the sound, the original Arabic allowed the verses to ripple through the city as unforgettable spiritual shockwaves. Because the focus was survival, these early chapters avoided the detailed societal laws or jurisprudence that would come much later. Instead, they focused entirely on Aqidah, the core creed. They cried out to, "O mankind," demanding that humanity look past false intermediaries and direct their worship solely to the Creator. The form matched the function. The rhythm of the recitation bypassed economic arguments and struck directly at the individual human soul. Abstract theology offered little comfort to those facing starvation and isolation. The early Muslims needed a way to prevent despair. The Quran provided psychological armor through the histories of past prophets who had faced their own seemingly insurmountable tyrants. Prophet Ibrahim was the ultimate Hanif. These verses from Surah Al-Anbiya detail how he stood alone against his people, questioning their carved statues. He provided a blueprint for moral courage, teaching the persecuted Muslims in Mecca how to stand firm against entrenched traditions. Similarly, the story of Prophet Musa provided a direct lesson in resilience. The text details Musa being commanded to confront the absolute arrogance of Pharaoh, despite his own human fears. These stories prove to the believers that worldly power eventually crumbles, and divine deliverance rewards those who remain patient. This 13-year crucible took a small, vulnerable group of individuals and forged them into a community capable of withstanding total social and economic isolation. This period of survival was the exact preparation required for the monumental migration, the Hijra, to Medina. If you open a physical copy of the Quran today, these brief Meccan chapters often sit toward the very back of the book, appearing long after the detailed legislative chapters revealed years later in Medina. Yet, while they sit at the physical end of the text, they remain the undeniable theological beginning. They are the foundation upon which everything else was built.